My name is Sarah, and I'm an event assistant here at Career Foundry. Welcome to our live talk with Morgan Lopez about building a compelling web development portfolio. Before we kick things off, I'm going to briefly introduce you to Career Foundry. We're an online education company that helps anyone to change into a career in tech. We provide training in UX and UI design, as well as web development and data analytics. We have a community of 6,500 plus students, graduates, mentors, tutors, and career specialists, and we train people from scratch and allow them to transition into a career that they love. Before I pass the mic to Morgan, I'd like to go over a few house rules for today. If you have any questions for our speaker, please feel free to post them in the chat, and we'll make sure that they are answered by the end of the session. And if you have any questions about our programs, please schedule a call with one of our program advisors. You can do that by clicking on the little sticky note at the top of the chat, and they will be happy to help you. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Morgan. Let's get started.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate the kind intro. Welcome. It looks like we've got people on board from California, London, Germany. Love it. I am here in Atlanta, Georgia, and actually this weekend I was in Alaska, so it would have been maybe a little bit more interesting had we tuned in on Saturday or Sunday, but love everyone coming from all over the place. That's great. The topic that we're going to cover today is building a compelling portfolio. So I'm going to share my screen. Everyone should be able to see this. So yeah, the topic is how to build a compelling portfolio. As we get started, what I'd love to know, and you can drop your answers into the chat, is what does success look like for you as we get started today? So if you think, about an hour from now as we wrap up, my hope is that you learned something new, that you found something actionable, that this time was worth it. And so I would love to know what do you hope that we cover? So go ahead and I'll leave a second for you to think about that. Really what I'm trying to get at here is how would you define success for our time together? There's a lot of different avenues we could go down, but I want your thoughts and impressions about what would make this a success for you. If you'll drop that into the chat, and we will wait awkwardly for a second and let you key in some of those thoughts or ideas, things that you would hope to learn. And I'm going to take some notes to make sure we covered what you find valuable today, rather than just jumping in and thinking that I have the perfect answers for you. Awesome, Jonathan. Thanks for kicking things off. Stuff I can implement on my own, how to make my portfolio not look junior. Okay, nice. Building a complete project. Yeah, so end to end. Yeah, leveling up your portfolio, building a complete project, how to stand out, Patrick. Yes, standing out is huge. So I want to give you some ways to do that. Things employers would like to see more of. Great. Yeah, most of how I'm approaching things today is from the perspective of a hiring manager. So a large chunk of my career has been spent interviewing, recruiting, hiring software engineers, designers. And so much of how I view portfolio sites and things like that is from the perspective of a hiring manager. I'm probably not really going to prescribe much to you today and saying, you need to do this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share from my experience what I've noticed and things that stood out to me. So this is my experience. I realize for many of you, your experience may vary, but my hope would be to just provide my perspective and how me and friends of mine who are in similar positions often view the portfolio of people that we review. All right, let's see, Michael, I would like to learn what web development industry finds important to help me sell my services. Okay, and then should I create case studies for my portfolio projects? Awesome. So it sounds like we're in the right ballpark. Let's go ahead and jump in. So I'm going to share my screen one more time. This is not going to be you just staring at a slideshow presentation. So I actually only have one more slide here, and then we're going to just dive right in and navigate the internet together. The first distinction that I want to make is between a resume and a portfolio. So a resume isn't a single artifact, typically a summary of your skills and experience. Where, as I use the term portfolio, what I want you to consider is your entire body of work. So not just one thing, and not just the place that you prefer to put them, but your entire online footprint and all of the things that you've done, not just that you have, organized onto your personal brochure site or your personal website, but across the internet. So that's a pretty important distinction because that's going to kick us off today as we get rolling. As you start to think about your portfolio, the easiest way I would encourage you to check it out is to Google yourself. Okay, so I've done this here to give you some examples. Part of why all of this matters is because in many cases, you don't get to pick what hiring managers or potential employers experience about you. You may give them a couple of things to initially check out, but then they're going to go hunting on their own. And so it helps to start where most people do their hunting on the internet and figure out what are they going to find, and then work backwards to take control over as much of those things as you can. So I've Googled myself here and I realize I have an kind of more of an established presence online. Some of you may be coming from like out in the woods, off the grid. You have very limited online presence. Well, one of the first things that you can start to figure out is how do you increase your overall online visibility. And part of why that matters is because as you are looking for jobs, it helps when, as a hiring manager, I'm looking at candidates who not only can create things on the internet, but know how the internet works, right? And can use it to their advantage. So it's not just being able to see somebody who has certain skills, but actually using those skills to their advantage, to put wind at their back, using them in their favor. And so I also pulled this up here because this highlights some of the top items that could appear in your portfolio. The first thing is LinkedIn. And so we'll go through a LinkedIn profile in a minute because that is an important part of your overall portfolio. Your personal website, we've got Twitter here, Medium. Okay, so pretty quickly, we've got a writing resource, a couple of social profiles, and then your personal brochure website. And all of these start to add up to this overall portfolio. So it helps to have these very consistent and think through them. As you start to increase your visibility online, going to these online profiles and establishing yourself, whether or not you choose to be active and post regularly, just going and grabbing your little chunk of land can be really impactful. I'm going to share a list of some of the places that I would suggest that you go and look up your, oh, it didn't paste very cleanly. No. Oh, well, that was terrible. It didn't post very cleanly. I just dropped it in the chat. Let's see if I can't. Yeah, that's pretty rough. Let's see if I can go on the fly here. Nope, I guess that's not going to work as I would like. So I dropped it in chat and I'll be sharing a link to all of these resources in a little bit. But these are places that I would suggest you go and set up your profile so that people can begin finding you online. Let me pull this over here and that'll be a little less distracting. Great. All right, now as you're going to these different places online and you're setting up your profile, consistency is really important because again, you want Google or other search engines to be able to connect all these little dots, all of this online real estate, connect it all to you, and that makes your overall portfolio more compelling, more consistent. As hiring managers are comparing you against other candidates, those that seem to know how the internet works and are using it well absolutely stand out. So things to keep consistent: name, description, and username, and photo. These are all things that any social profile I create, I want them to be pretty darn consistent, especially the name, the username, and the photo. So one way that you can do that with the username I'm going to give you a little resource here. There's a tool for a username lookup. Right, there's a bunch of results. I encourage you to check these out. And then I can search. So Morgan, let's say Captain Morgan, right? Maybe something a little clever here. And I can see all the places where this username is available. All right. If you're just getting started, then this is a great opportunity. You have a clean slate to really start to build something that's consistent. And this helps search engines connect a lot of those dots as you get going. All right. So I'm going to paste this into the chat as well. So if you want to start to look up usernames that you could keep consistent across all the sites, you can try and grab your name. So I've been fortunate and able to grab my name on a lot of different platforms. Maybe your name is more common, or just there's a lot of usernames that correspond. And so coming up with something clever can also be very helpful. I'm going to share with you somebody named Annie, who's much earlier in this process. And she has a very clever username that allows her to grab her own unique username consistently across the internet. So username lookup is a great tool. There's plenty of them. All right, so let me go back here. All right, so we're going to take it from the top and go to LinkedIn. A general rule of thumb that I would encourage you to remember when creating your personal portfolio as well as any online profile is clear beats clever every day. Oftentimes we make a mistake of confusing what makes a good dating relationship and what makes a good hiring or interview process or a great candidate. So we want to be a little mysterious and playful and really, clever, very thoughtful. But the reality is most hiring managers are not going to spend much time reviewing your stuff. You get seconds, maybe you're lucky and get some minutes, and then hopefully you can parlay those into more time. But by and large, they're moving pretty quickly through a lot of their applicants. And so being very clear about the value that you provide helps them keep it very simple. And the easiest way to differentiate yourself early in the process from other candidates is just to be super, super simple. So you'll notice on my LinkedIn profile here, I'm not currently trying to get a job, I'm trying to hire people, but I still use the same strategy. So I use the cover image to actually send a message to people, right? You almost can't help but read this. It's very clear. There's not a lot of distraction, high contrast. I also, in my description, I share about some accolades that the company that we're at and that I'm hiring for has accomplished. I used to actually have this at the end. So I wrote a much different description that had more about the book that I wrote, and then I would put the chief technology officer at the end. But an important thing to remember is when you're making connection requests, and I don't have any currently, when you're making connection requests, people can only see like the first sentence. And so you want to lead with the most compelling thing, right? Clear, simple, concise, before the word wraps. This real estate right here is the first thing that people are going to see when you make a connection request, right? Next, as we're going down, many of you may not have a lot to put here that feels applicable, but one of the easiest things that you can do with any work experience that you have, right, even if it's not with a technology company, is to use the description in the previous companies to talk not about what the company did, but talk about the value that you provided and the work that you did while you're at the company. That goes a really long way. And there are plenty of profiles that I read through, and people just talked about what the business did, where I don't care about the business. I cared about what you did at that company. And there's often, more crossover than you might think to what makes a great software engineer, a great designer, a UI professional. Another thing to think about as you're looking at your LinkedIn profile is your previous work experience. So for years, I didn't have many items on my LinkedIn, largely because I worked for a consulting company for about 10 years. So I had one item, which was that company on my profile. And then over time, I realized, and I saw this really great example from another person who was in the consulting world. And what they did was they actually went back through each business that they worked with and brought that business up to their LinkedIn profile. And so you'll see here now as you scroll through, I was a consultant at a lot of different companies or with a lot of different companies. And so I went through and added each of them to my LinkedIn profile This is not illegal. I did in fact work for these companies. I was a consultant with them. And so I increased the visibility of many of these other organizations because I had that experience. And instead of assuming that somebody is going to be curious enough about this one company, I pulled out each of the individual items so that at a glance, you could pretty quickly digest the amount of experience that I have. Many of you have more experience than you realize, but it's all about making it way more visible to hiring managers. Okay, so we're not going to spend much more time here. Now, as I'm rolling through a lot of this, I know it's a lot of information, so please key in your questions if you have them. You can drop those into chat. Yes, right in the chat box, that's great. But some of you may be thinking, okay, this is fine, but you've been in the industry for 10 years or more. I haven't been around that long. Right? I don't have that much experience. I don't, I Google myself and, 30 other people who aren't me come up. What do I do about that? So I'm going to actually give you another example now. So this is a friend of mine. Her name is Annie. And I believe I spelled her name right. Yeah. So Annie is a code school graduate. She graduated, I think, less than a year ago. And in under a year, she has managed to capture her own name, capture her keyword on Google. Right, pretty great. So this is Annie, I think the second and third that you see here. So in a very short amount of time, Annie has captured this real estate, and we're going to see why. So the first thing I'm going to do is click on her brochure site. I'll get that loaded up. But what you'll notice when I go to her Twitter account, and I should be able to go to her GitHub, is she's so consistent. Her photo is different, which this is part of a personal preference. I like to keep it the same. Annie uses slightly different photos. But you'll notice that I know by toggling between these that I have the right Annie, right? That I have the same person because she uses this unicorn and lightning bolt, and Annie Bombani is her username in both places, right? And I believe LinkedIn is the same. So she exists in many places online, and she has that same unicorn lightning bolt vibe with Annie Bombani as the username. And so as I'm navigating her online personas, it's really easy to connect the dots. And the less time people spend trying to understand what all you have going on and can just dive right in, again, that's another way to gain an advantage. And this compounded over time is, I believe, a big part of why she has managed to rank for her own name so well on Google. Okay, so I've talked a lot about other stuff that does not have to do with your personal brochure site. It's because employers are going to spend a lot of time on this other stuff. But many of you also want to know about your portfolio website, your specific site. And so I will talk through that for sure. I know many of you are looking for tips and tricks on that. So we will spend some time here. I'm going to pull up Annie's because I think she does this very well. As I go through some things that I see that are, I think, really great staples. She's done a great job of introducing herself, which not enough people, summarize that in a very thoughtful way. She's also included some links, which is cool. You can tell pretty quickly her use of emojis is very playful and fun. She highlights the tools in her tool belt, right? Her stack, her experience. I think there's a world if you were to do something like this that maybe you could group them by products or tools that she's used to and then programming languages, I think could help. This can be a little overwhelming just to see the sheer number, but that could also be what she's going for, right? Of whoa, she could do a lot. But it sometimes doesn't have that same practical appeal when I'm trying to parse out JavaScript versus GitHub, because one is a product and one is a programming language. Let's go down to the actual portfolio items, the individual pieces. She covers the bases very well. So for each piece, I think she's put 4 or 5 items here. She has a title, a brief description, which is great. She links to 2 things. One is the source code, and the other is the actual demo. If I were to try and improve this and add a little bit extra that I think would be very compelling to hiring managers, it would be a video walkthrough. So using a tool like Loom, I just typed it out in the chat. You can do a very brief, again, under 2-minute video recording of the actual demo environment. Why I think the video is really impactful is because instead of just handing them a hiring manager a link to something and then expecting them to navigate and make sense of what they're seeing, the video, you get to talk them through it. So they get to hear how articulate you are, and you have the best part, which is a guided experience. You can click the happy path through your demo to really like make sense of what you've created. I would talk about where this idea or these ideas came from, what were challenges that you faced, how you overcame those challenges. All of those things really complement each portfolio item. And as a hiring manager, I don't see enough of it, right? So it's really cool that in this case, there's a personal dating app or personal date night. But what were the specific technical challenges that you overcame in creating it? Because so much of work involves overcoming technical challenges. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity in a really good brochure site to highlight that learning. And if you provide the video, so given three things, the source code, the demo, and a video overview, I believe most hiring managers would pick a video overview because I don't have to guess, right? People like to feel smart. They like to feel like they know what's going on. And oftentimes, if I were to click, let's say, GitHub repo, I'm not sure what to do next, right? Maybe I'm pretty quick and I say, oh, well, it looks like Annie didn't write all of this code. Okay, well, let me go find some of her commits, right? But I'm spending seconds trying to get to Annie's contribution, whereas you could deep link directly to a commit. So instead of linking to the repo, link to a specific commit message that's been created, because then I can go right to see the actual contribution that you as a candidate made to this code, rather than hitting a repo and maybe I'm like, okay, well, package lock.json, right? There's a lot of advantages to direct linking them, deep linking them into where you want them to go rather than dropping them on the main thing. Also driving the point home, last little bit here, on a demo site. When I come here as a hiring manager and I want to like see what they've done, for all I know, there could be an incredible AI that's generating something behind the scenes. And I'm stuck trying to figure out what cities you support because I don't know is Atlanta a thing? Oh, okay, Atlanta, great. I just as easily though could have guessed something that didn't have any events. Right? It looks like maybe she's covered that with some really good seed data, but they're spending time poking around trying to just like make sense of what you've got going on rather than spending time, giving you credit for the work. And in some cases, hiring managers are not going to spend that much time putting in that work. So for each item, I think you can go through and include an actual demo link. Okay, something that Annie does that I've not seen, and I love it, is bringing testimonials and referrals front and center on your brochure site. You may be asking yourself, okay, yeah, but what do I do if I've only had one job or I've only had a few jobs and they're not tech related at all? They're just maybe you were a bartender or a server at a restaurant, or you're an electrical engineer, or you used to work at Home Depot. Okay. The important part about testimonials is not necessarily people vouching for your technical abilities. It helps to just have people who speak to what kind of team member you are, what kind of person you are, somebody of integrity, hardworking. All of these things are really valuable, and I think still make great testimonials. So while you may feel like not having a large portfolio of past projects, past work, past team members in technology, I don't think you need it. You'll notice as you get down here, I think one of the latter parts in Annie's here, I don't think, let's see, high quality mailing list. She quickly understood what I was looking for. I'm not exactly sure. Maybe she did some design work here, which today Annie is a developer. It's like this doesn't even relate to the type of work she got, but it was past experience. And the more powerful thing here is this is a real person who seems to have a real business of some sort, and they think highly of Annie. And that goes a long way. So having a couple people who do that is really compelling. Also, pro tip, photos go a long way in increasing trust. So just having pictures of other people who aren't just Annie and who seem to be vouching for her is a really nice addition as well. All right, and last thing, she has a contact form. I think you could just as easily have a mail to link or something like that. But you'll notice she includes links out to these other places online. This is super common, and yet another reason why investing in your overall portfolio matters, because you're giving hiring managers typically these other places. And so being thoughtful about how each one is curated can be really, really compelling. Now, if you're interested, I am working on a project because I've had a lot of people ask about the portfolio website, and I'm working on a project it'll be a Git repo. So if you're interested in this, maybe raise your hand, or you can drop me an email, and I'll send you a link as soon as I've pieced it together. So this is my email. And this is like my crack at a basic portfolio website. So I'll talk you through what I did and why I think it matters. So this is a kind of a high level overview about me and what I find important. I use plenty of lorem ipsum text in here, by the way. I love having consistent call to action throughout. So maybe it's download resume, maybe yours is send me an email, contact me, whatever it is. Consistency is really huge. Of your individual portfolio items, I would typically suggest you feature just a few. And let's say you've got a large number of items in your portfolio. Well, feature a small number. All right, so pull them out. You'll notice I haven't even added in descriptions here yet. This is very new. And then you can still list out other options. And yes, if you have a question, go ahead and just type it into chat, Sabit. That'd be great. Or maybe you're interested in getting access to this repo, in which case, shoot me an email. So if you, and people say like, well, what's the ideal number of items to put in my portfolio? Maybe you got 3, maybe like, should I do 10? I don't really know. I would encourage a 2-prong approach. First is have many items, a large number. I think that's great. They don't have to be full products. I know one of the questions that was asked was like, do I have to complete the project? Not necessarily. As long as what you're representing is that you built a feature, not a product. I think that's totally fine. Having just a feature, and then instead of linking to the whole repo, link to a commit message of when you created that feature. I think that's totally fine. And that can help bolster your portfolio quite a bit, because and sometimes with a product, you may spend 100 hours on one part of it. Oh, well, don't wait to finish the project. Just direct hiring managers or people checking out your resume into that specific commit message. It's a beautiful thing about technology is you don't have to have people eat the whole thing. They can just go and get a bite of a certain part. So cast a really wide net and then elevate a couple of them. And so the way that I do that is I pulled them out with an image plus a description. Awesome. I see y'all interested. Great, great, great. And then I've created space where I can just link to a bunch of stuff. And so I put company names because I tend to work on kind of with companies directly, but maybe you've got different features that you've built or whatever, right? So I've got 3 key items, and then, I mean, you could put probably 100 items here and it wouldn't be too crazy, right? 100 might be a lot anyway, but I can pack a lot of punch here, but it doesn't take up a lot of space. And, I could link out to individual features or to projects or to companies. If maybe some of these are incomplete, you could put a little paragraph underneath that just says, hey, and then here's some other stuff I've kicked around over the years. I think it's totally fine. All right, then the about section. So you'll notice I pulled a lot of inspiration from Annie and how she did it. Let's go back, you can see. Boom. I have not put in this paragraph yet, but I did mention some of my favorite tools. I use this little underline thing that I'd created. I linked to my social profiles under my photo, right? So pretty basic. But something that I think every code school graduate should consider doing is including a picture of their Git activity. So on your Git profile, everybody has one of these graphs. If you've been committing code consistently and pushing it to GitHub, you should have a lot of dark green squares. Well, okay, Morgan, but why does that matter? They're just green squares and it's super easy to write a commit. It is, but it's really hard to do it consistently. And plenty of you may not be pushing your code, always pushing your code to GitHub, but for those that are, if you're writing consistently and pushing it to GitHub consistently, then you're gonna have a beautiful, well-lit graph. And what that tells employers, if you don't have it, sometimes hiring managers just kind of understand like, okay, well, maybe not everything's on GitHub, right? So they'll discount if you don't have it. But if you do have it and it is vibrant and there's a lot of green squares, then the message that it sends, even early in your career, it actually matters more early in your career, is that, wow, this person's consistently logging activity. I've seen the opposite. So I've seen people who it's like, oh, like 1 or 2 things just during the weekdays, just while it seems like they were in code school, right? That sends a very different message than high amount of activity spread over a large chunk of time. And even if after you graduate, people are inclined to just look for a job. But it's important to also keep writing code. And the easiest way of communicating that without really having to say anything is just take a picture of that graph. So what I did was I went back to a previous year where I had a lot of activity, but for you can zoom in and screenshot this graph and then put it right on your portfolio website, right? And for those who know what they're looking at, they can make sense of what this is. I was going for a little bit more artistic, and so for you, maybe it makes sense to also include the months because they'll make it's again clearer, less clever. And so you could put that in here. Then testimonials. This is again something that I think Annie did, and it's just so good, and no reason we shouldn't have that. I went, I think, a step further. Maybe let's see. Yeah, I actually pulled out like a short blurb that I feel like fully captures like what I want out of this. So you could read the whole thing, or just here's the nicest part that they said about me, and then for this, my intention is to link this just to a Calendly link, right, or some type of like scheduler, or just send an email. So this is a mail to link. When you click it, it pulls up an email that they can then just send a message, right? Sometimes this adds a level of complexity that people want to just, they work out of their inbox all day long and just want to send a message. I want to make it super easy for them to just send me an email. And yes, eventually you might get some spam or something like that, but by and large, the ease of making your information more accessible to potential hiring managers tends to work out pretty well. All right, so these are some of the basics that I covered here. Oh yeah, I think I skipped right over, including logos of companies you've worked for. And you don't necessarily, in my case, this is true, but yours might not be. Maybe you worked at Home Depot in the garden center and you didn't work for Home Depot as a software engineer. I think that's totally okay. You have work experience at one of these companies, and so including those kinds of things in areas like this in your portfolio is totally fine. Because one thing I will tell you, and I did in fact work in the garden center, working my way through college, was I learned a lot from working at Home Depot about how the company functions. I learned a lot about customer service, and I learned a lot about aligning getting work done with interacting with people and all those different things. And they had an incredible training program that if you've been through one of those, then you've benefited a lot in ways that you probably can't quite articulate from those types of training programs and working as a part of those companies. So, definitely be ready if they ask you what you did there to communicate it clearly. But it helps to connect the dots for them rather than expecting them to put it together all by themselves. Yeah, love it. I'll come back through and try and grab some of these emails. Let's see, Bruna, as a hiring manager, would you find it misleading if I included past experience that did not relate to tech or current job I'm applying for? Past experience. I would, if I had to ask a follow-up question here, it would just be, what is the past experience? But there are plenty of people I know, or like applications I've seen that I know, even in LinkedIn, it does a great job of saying what they did there. That just like experience working at that company says something, right? It's not nothing. And I think that's really impactful. I took a web development course at Udemy. Do the certificates I got from completing my course have weight value during my job search? Yeah, absolutely. I don't know that I would say, a Udemy course is better or worse than a Skillshare course. But you're showing that like you did something, you put in the work, you put in the time. If you completed it, right, those certificates, no one of them is like, whoa, this is the most magical thing ever, but they do add up, right? One of the things, and this is a prediction, that I think in the coming years, one of the most popular interview questions will be, what did you do during 2020? Right? The world shut down. We were all forced into our homes, global pandemic, quarantine. What did you do? And there were some people who did nothing. They locked themselves away and they did absolutely nothing. There are other people who learned a new hobby. They started cooking bread. They they started running. They started doing something constructive. They bought a Peloton and started cycling, all of these things, right? There is no wrong answer. I think the only truly wrong answer is nothing. I threw up my hands and just surrendered to the world, and I slept the 18 to 2 years away. Part of why that matters, and I think back to the question around the courses and the certificates and all that stuff, it shows that you're doing stuff, that you have movement toward a goal, and that is compelling because most people aren't happy with their jobs. but they just talk about it. Very few people do it. Part of why I love hiring out of coding boot camps, code schools, and things of that nature is because those people have shown me they're willing to take action and do something. It also, people who do that have had to drink through a fire hose to get this knowledge. And I know what it takes to learn programming. I did not go to school I did not get a computer science degree from college. I went as an early childhood education major. So I too transitioned into tech without a CS degree. So I know how hard this stuff is to learn. So people who are willing to actually take action and try and acquire that knowledge, that does say something. And I think oftentimes you might be pretty quick to discount the fact that you haven't been doing this for 10, 20 years. But the reality is, you coming in after having done something else, you've got a bunch of experience that you bring in with you. And also, because you're fresh and acquiring all of these net new skills, that has weight and that has power. That can be, I think it's more compelling than you think it is. All right, we have another question here. How can you tell if you're ready for a job? I have taken up coding during lockdown and have been taking several courses, but some job applications seem intimidating in the language used and requirements. Yeah, I don't know. The first place that I started was just looking for friends and family who needed a website of some sort. One of the things that I loved, my mom wrote a book recently, and I believe this is actually during quarantine, and she wrote a book, and she wanted to sell it online. And so I helped her build a landing page and a website. What's great if you know somebody who's done something similar is those websites are not complicated, right? They're pretty basic, and you can get them up and running. But those types of like small bite-sized projects, they don't have a massive scope. There's not even a database behind it. I used like a form builder, like Jotform, to run the payment. So I didn't have to set that up. It was just super simple, basic landing page. Taking a swing at projects like that can help reinforce your confidence in whether or not you're ready to take bigger and bigger opportunities. And I would imagine most of us have friends or family who are doing something that needs a website, and there's an opportunity to practice. I would encourage you to not take too big of a bite. One of our earliest websites was for a friend who was making homemade baby food recipes. And we built a whole Rails app, and wow, looking back, it became a massive project. There was commenting, there was liking, there was shares, and all the stuff within the product. That's a pretty big undertaking. But a brochure site for a self-published book, right? Much, much simpler. There's also plenty of places online, whether it's Reddit or Facebook groups, where people who need help with those things would absolutely raise their hand if somebody was willing to work for free or pretty inexpensive, because it's not about the money. It's about getting that experience and that confidence to know that you can do this. And usually people who are just starting out, who kind of feel defeated and get beat down, it's not because they weren't ready for the work. It's just because they took a bite of something that was way too complicated. Where if you pick something simple enough, it can be a great place to start. Awesome. Looks like I answered that question. Let me check this out. What about summer internships or short-term jobs? Yeah, if you can afford it, do it. I realize for many people, you may be in a position where you can't work for free. If you can, I think that's an unfair competitive advantage that you should absolutely take advantage of. We had somebody one time who applied for one of our, no, didn't apply for a job, just reached out for an opportunity, sent me an email, followed me on LinkedIn, followed along with some of my writings and that kind of stuff, and was very persistent. And had just said like, hey, look, I want a job. You don't have anything available, but I want to work with you. I'll work for free. I was like, oh God, I hate this. I don't like to, I'm not going to ask people to work for free. I don't like that as a concept. At the time, as a company, we said, we're not going to do unpaid internships anymore. And we worked something out where I think it was like $10 an hour. Right? We paid $10 an hour. I got to pay something. He's like, whatever, I don't care. I want the experience. I want to, learning was more important than earning at that season of his life. Well, what he got was the opportunity to try stuff. And I was giving him all kinds of tasks, odds and ends that he pretty quickly moved up. And after about 3 months, I was like, shoot, like this guy's doing meaningful work. I got to pay him more. I got to figure out how to do this, because at a certain point, I might lose him if, he's gaining all the skills and now his skills have exceeded the compensation. And it's really easy to do if you're working for free or little to nothing. That in order to keep him, I knew that I had to increase his comp. And so we had a number of conversations over many months. And by the time he left, He was making an entry-level salary, and he had racked up way more experience than just waiting until a job became available. Because oftentimes jobs come after companies can afford to pay for them. Whereas if you can work for less or for free, it creates a lot of opportunities for yourself. So if you can, I would definitely encourage you to do it. Only as long as you need to, though. You don't have to do it forever. And for a company that isn't paying you, you don't owe them too much. And so you can either renegotiate later or use that and parlay it into new opportunities. I think that's absolutely fine. If you can't do that, then it might require a little bit more creativity, or honestly, it's just going to be a little bit harder to look for opportunities that pay what you need. And that's just a very true reality of work in general. When I started my career, I was single and I pretty much crashed on a friend's couch most of the time. And today I'm married and I have two kids. We have a house and all of these other really complicated and not inexpensive things. And so the constraints at the early season of my life are very different than the later stage. But at any stage, you can figure out what am I willing to risk or to leverage to make this a reality. And for those that can work for less, it does open a lot of doors and opportunities. And so if you can afford to get them, then I think they're great. Um, it's not just about the work itself, but it's about the team and working alongside other people who will vouch for you. That, in many cases, is even more compelling. Somebody asked, what are hiring managers looking for? Hiring managers are looking for three things. I'm going to drop them in the chat here. The first is, are you capable? Can you do the work? The second is, are you curious? Are you interested in doing this kind of work? I cut lawns in high school, mowed grass, and so I'm very capable of doing that work, but I have no interest in doing it. So I'm capable, but not curious about cutting grass. And so I would not make a great employee because I don't really want to do that kind of work. And the last thing, these are three C's. Last thing is culture. Google did this massive research study to figure out what make the best teams. So they put together a mix of a team of all A players, a team of all C players, a mix of A and B and C and players, and all the things. And at the end of the day, what they realized you can't determine a high performing team based simply on the caliber of the players you put on that team. It all comes back to psychological safety. And so when I'm talking about culture here, I'm not talking about beer on Fridays and ping pong tables, which have come to be pretty common in like the tech world. What I'm talking about is feeling valued by the people you work alongside, being able to share ideas openly and honestly with those that you work with, feeling like you can be yourself, be vulnerable, actually build connections with people. So of the three things, capable, curious, and culture, the one that matters most is culture. And as you're going through the interview process and those types of things, realize that it's not just about trying to create an experience, a portfolio that makes other people want to pick you, right? But you should be casting a signal so that it's the right person or the right company for where you want to work, right? So it definitely goes both ways. But I'm going to pause now. We're going to turn it over. If you have any questions, this covers it. One thing, as you are taking time to think about your questions, I'm also learning. So I'm still very much figuring things out and trying to be better. So I would love some feedback. This is a form that if you take a couple seconds, give me some feedback about how I did, what was the most helpful, what could I do better next time. Also, if you thought, hey, you dropped a lot of stuff in chat, some of it wasn't very well formatted, here is a link to, this has all of the different resources that I talked about. One thing that we didn't actually cover, but it's in here, where like, how do you just make your portfolio look better? So I think somebody asked like less junior. I am a big fan of using templates. So part of why I'm putting together kind of my own personal brochure site experience is because I don't think step one should be design your own thing and then build your own thing. Because if your goal is just to work at a job where you build stuff, it's very rare that you also have to be the one to design it. And so I would use that to your advantage and borrow an existing theme so that you can spend more time building items in your portfolio. Most hiring managers fail to appreciate the fact that you built your portfolio website and then filled it with items. They only look at the items that are in it. and often will just discount if it's hard to use, not mobile friendly, all those different pieces. And so using templates is great. Some of the stuff that's here, and I'll just pull this up really quickly. Yeah, y'all are able to see that. Great. There's a bunch of tools. So Undraw is an awesome tool for illustration. So if you want to just put cooler illustrations, these are all free open source illustrations. So just like people give away code, people give away art. There's open source photographs. So these are all beautiful photos. If you're like, I want a picture of a telephone, then you type in phone and you can use this and put these in your portfolio. There's ways, obviously, of improving your writing, both just like grammar, but then also making it more compelling and punchy. So I included all of these links so you can check those things out. This will help increase the quality. I did not talk a lot about writing today, but one of the easiest ways to stand out with employers is to do a little bit of writing. Fortunately, you don't need a lot. Most candidates have zero writing in their portfolio. And so if you have a couple of pieces, I gave you some prompts here, it definitely makes you stand out. And so if I had to choose between two candidates who, for all intents and purposes, were kind of evenly matched, but one I could tell was articulate and had put time into writing, then I would pick the writer. Most work today that's done asynchronously on Slack or online involves writing of some sort. And so I think this is great practice, but just simply by being able to check that box is really huge. I would not encourage you to go build a blog. I think you could for your portfolio, but I wouldn't encourage that to be the place that you write. Medium.com is excellent. It's beautiful, well-designed, and it's another item in your portfolio that they also will help distribute your content because they have an audience instead of you having to build your own. So some recommendations there. I hope that's helpful. Last thing, and I know we will transition here to questions. I'm looking for a piece. Yes, here we go. If you found this content or other things, the stuff I've been talking about helpful, we actually wrote a book that covers a lot of this. So Code School, the book, this is not a book about programming. You are in a course, you're going through some excellent material that is going to help you do that. This is about all the other stuff, the soft skills that when it comes to getting the most of Code School, getting a job, thriving in your career, all of that stuff that isn't the code, but is in some ways just as important. We cover that and more in Code School book. So let's jump into some questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Morgan, for this interactive presentation. It was awesome. We have a question from Adrian who says, I'm a UI designer, but I have a strong interest in front-end development. Is it feasible to aspire for a job where I can do a little bit of both, or should I rather laser focus on either of these fields?
So I'm a big fan, personally, of playing to my strengths. I think there's more value to be gained in life by playing to your strengths than to being a well-rounded person. If you look at the people in life who tend to really excel, it's those who play to your strengths. If you want to do both, my instinct goes toward play to your strengths first, and then figure out how to crack the door open on these other interests. To try and get both at once. There's actually, I believe, Michelle Obama and a couple of Oprah is also quoted as saying this, like, you can have everything you want in life, you just can't have it all at once. And sometimes we kind of come out of the gate and we say, well, my perfect job, and it looks like a grocery list of requirements. I would optimize for opportunity for yourself. And if I had to pick two candidates, I'm going to pick the one who just is just drop dead better at the work. And so lean into your strengths there. And then there's plenty of opportunities. And actually in Code School book, I believe Paige was one of the people that we had like interviewed and brought her story into the book. And she talked about, she was a UI person who wanted to do development. She got a job at UI and then was working feverishly doing development work. And the first opportunity at the job where they were like, hey, we need somebody to grab this project, she was ready. And that was her shot. But she'd been working at the company for 6 or 8 months and had been practicing and honing those skills so that when the opportunity came up, because once you have the job, opportunities will present themselves. She worked to grab it. But I don't think the opposite would have necessarily happened for a job that's a little bit of this and a little, it's already hard enough to get your first gig. And so to put that burden on employers or to kind of set that expectation, it makes it's kind of like takes an already small set of opportunities and shrinks them even further. Whereas if you can lean into your strengths, you'll be able to beat out the competition and then getting in the room, crack open new opportunities. So Adriana, I hope that answered your question.
Awesome. Thanks, Morgan. I also had a question that I thought might be interesting for the audience. You touched on it a little bit earlier, but you mentioned that your friend, was it Annie? She had a really strong summary about herself on her website. And I was wondering if you have any advice for our audience on, maybe if they are someone who has only had one job, how to even start developing that self summary.
Yeah, there's a lot of, let me see if I can find this this resource here. There's some frameworks that I use to like kind of slice and dice who we are. And some call it a value system, but there's here's a link here. And one of the things is if you click through this, and I'll just share my screen to show it. They're like exercises or thought experiments, right? So what are your core values? Do you have a personal purpose statement? Do you have a personal mantra or a rallying cry? I personally love the Venn diagram. And so for myself, the way I think about like the context that I want to work, I think of it like a Venn diagram, right? What are the circles that overlap? Well, for me, it's entrepreneurship, it's technology, and it's social impact. Okay, the fact that I can articulate that to you, that like I kind of think about my world in these three circles that overlap, is a level of clarity that for some companies, so New Story, which is the global housing nonprofit that I work with, is at the intersection of those three things. I am the chief technology officer, so I live at the intersection of business, technology, and positively impacting the world. And I think that can be very helpful being able to describe that. I listed out a couple other things, right? What is your superpower? There's a couple other different items, and all of this is about distilling down what is your like zone of genius, your sweet spot. Because if you don't have a lot of experience, I think that's totally fine. Because there are plenty of things that connect people to each other that have nothing to do with our work, right? I am a father of two daughters, right? There's something that like dads of daughters freak out about that is exclusive to that category of people, that if I get across the table from you and I know that you have daughters as well, we're going to be able to have an incredible conversation and we're going to make a connection. And it doesn't matter that may not be the right technical fit. We have to remember that we are applying to companies to work, but humans make the decision. And any way that we can help build connections to people, I love specialty coffee. I love to run. You have things that of interest that you can absolutely talk about. And what's great is as you can, talk about or converse about how those things, like what have those things taught you? So I could write content with you about what long distance running has taught me about programming. Right? I can talk to you about what specialty coffee has taught me about programming. Right? Other than just like make sure your mug is really far from your keyboard while you're typing. There's plenty there that you can connect these dots. And sometimes we're kind of looking for permission to connect them, but I don't think you have to. I think you can connect those dots. So one of the things I also included up the thread is like example blog posts, and just use some of that content. And as you start to go through these exercises or thought experiments, you're going to realize like, oh, that's like a fascinating little nugget about myself, a little summary, a little thing. And very rarely it's in I had the like feats of incredibleness that you've accomplished in technology. So a lot of times it's just in the connecting of the dot is where the story is to be told. And many of you have had very interesting lives, I would imagine, outside of technology connect those dots for me. I think that's makes it really compelling.
Thank you so much. And for anyone who is listening who is already a Career Foundry student, your job prep course also does a really good job of helping you to write a description about yourself and recognizing what are your values when it comes to a workplace. So if you're already in the course, I highly recommend taking advantage of that section of the job prep. We do have one more question from Sabit. What is the best way to get an internship? I believe it's a really good way to learn fast, but I find it hard to get being a self-taught web developer.
Yeah, so a lot of places that people who come out of more like technical programs, they tend to look at very like product companies. So if you go to like Angel List or Hacker News to look for jobs, a lot of those are product companies. So they're companies that they're building something and need developers. There's a whole category of companies that are agencies. They're dev shops. They build other people's stuff. So there is one like online directory. So it's called Clutch. And I don't know how great the directory is or not, but you can look up agencies. So this is the second, if I think of their product companies, there are agencies. So they build other people's stuff. Clutch is just a directory of those agencies that do all kinds of stuff. There's so much opportunity at these places, and not a lot of them are going to spend the $100, $200 to post jobs in these like tech job boards because they're like tech adjacent, and the margins of these companies are just different. But there's tons of opportunities there. And the other category, so if you have product, you have service shops, and then you have what I would consider like where technology is a support structure. So my first job in technology was actually for a coffee company. They sold coffee online. They didn't even know what to call what I did. I didn't have a job title. It was very informal, but I got a lot of experience, a lot of opportunities. They're not going to go to Indeed and post a job listing for this. They just the problem was just unaddressed in their business because technology was like second or third to like what they did, which is roast and sell coffee. But if you're going to roast and sell coffee, you have a bookkeeping system, you have messaging internally, you have order tracking, you have a website that sells all of these things. They have all the stuff, but they just don't go. They don't recruit in the same pools of talent that everything else does. And so I think putting that lens on and thinking about what are local businesses that could use what I provide and go talk to them, right? Instead of waiting for them to put up a sign or put up a job listing so that you can come in, right? Ask for a recommendation from a friend or just reach out to them and say, hey, I was poking around your website. I noticed that you had a couple of errors on your site. I'd love to come in and fix them for free, right? Do something instead of saying, hey, I'd love for you to hire me full time with benefits and a salary and retirement. That's a really big ask. That's like me meeting you for the first time and saying, hey, will you marry me? What? Right? Or it's like, hey, can I buy you a cup of coffee? Oh, it's a way different level of commitment. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity to do that. Most of us live in a town or a city that has other businesses. I would almost guarantee you that one of those businesses could use some of your help. They're probably not going to be able to pay you well for it, but could use help getting some of this stuff done. And so there's opportunities there that you don't have to wait for it. You don't necessarily need a full exclusive internship. I get this question quite a bit, where people are like, will you be my mentor? I'm like, that sounds like a lot of commitment. I don't even know what you mean by mentor. But if you email me a question, I will answer your email, period. So I may not be willing to like commit to the whole thing, but if when you have questions, you ask me and I answer them, and if that's a mentorship to you, then cool. Just do that. Don't even ask me for the commitment. Just start behaving as if this is a thing. And I think in much the same way for internship opportunities, if you just approached a business and said, hey, I've got some software like programming abilities, web development, they may call it something different, which is tricky. Is there a problem I could tackle for you? Maybe a website that needs to be updated. Most businesses have this low-hanging stuff that they don't want to jump through the mental hoops of crafting an internship with a job description, la la la. But if you offer to fix one of their problems as a transaction, right? Hey, I'd love to come fix this and then be done. You get to actually come through. It's like very clear, well defined. You get to be done and have a positive referral without as much of the like hoopla and ceremony behind it. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there for people to just say like, hey, I noticed you have you have outdated WordPress plugins on your website. I can update them for you. I won't charge anything, right? Because what you're getting out of that, if not the experience of doing that work, you're getting somebody who was like, whoa, shoot, that was nice. Yeah, I'd totally write a recommendation. Or, yeah, I would totally sign off on a recommendation that you write and I can just put my name on. It's way more accessible. It gets harder and harder when we put a lot of ceremony around it, when we look for titles and big commitments and all of that. But there's a lot of opportunity if we just keep it simpler.
Awesome. Thanks so much for your insight on that. We are at time now. I'll give you all about 30 more seconds to pop any last minute questions in the chat. So go ahead and ask your questions now if you have anything left. And I think if you scroll up in the chat, there's Morgan's email, so you can contact him for access to that page. And if you have any other questions for him, you can certainly connect on LinkedIn. Thank you all for attending. One more time, if you are interested in becoming a web developer by studying with Career Foundry, you can just click that sticky note at the top of the chat, and that will direct you to a page where you can book a call with our program advisor. Any questions and specifics that you have about our program, they will be happy to answer for you. And thank you all so much. Morgan, what's your take on pineapple on pizza?
Yes, for sure. Hawaiian, usually so ham, pineapple, jalapeno. So good. So not indiscriminately. There needs to be a little combo action going on. So yes.
The most important question for last.
Love it.
All right. It looks like that's it. So we're going to close out. Thank you all so much for attending, and thank you, Morgan.
My pleasure.